Right before I walked into my office, Eric said to me, don't forget to talk about the collections. Bring up Virgin Heroes. That'll set Jen off.
Oh my God. Okay, so first of all, I am obsessed with collections.
Okay, tell everybody what they've won with collections.
So Eric had this great idea, which is that we should essentially, like, you know, like we have pages that are like, okay, it's enemies to lovers, and you can look at these books, but there's so many people who have great ideas about like microtropes, right? Like smaller, like, right, a smaller way to organize or collect a series of books. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that this becomes, I think, especially important now, and this was, I think, Eric's idea too, is that it is harder and harder to find good lists of romances on the internet, right? When you and I started, you could easily be like, all right, give me, you know, blah, blah, blah romance. And you could easily find people's lists. But now, the internet is just
so hard. It's too big. There's impossible to discover things.
Right. Agreed. Right. And so he was like, let's get, you know, people essentially like our listeners, authors, the two of us, to like make groups of books that are basically like your favorite microtrope, or just like something you've noticed about a bunch of books, a way to read a bunch of books together. And we are calling this the collections department, which is funny. Only we promise like never to call your mom and tell her that you didn't pay your bills. And like some of them are just like our like, right, like every deep dive we've ever done, all of our best of, right? Mm-hmm. So you can kind of look at those as an easy way to see all those at once. But then we have like people who have like microtropes. Like, so we asked B in her books and she made one about mustaches. Or
my friend Shane did one about food in historicals. And then and Jen did too.
I did only one's up so far.
Only one's up. He's
Why isn't the other one so funny, you guys?
He's like, Jen can wait. Everybody else is going up. So Jen did one. Originally it was called Hoops, There It Is.
No, Hoop, There It Is. Like, Hoop,
it was
there
called
it is.
Hoop, There It Is. And then, so it's a basketball one. And then Eric put into the text thread, I changed the structure of this title to match the title of the song with parentheses and exclamation.
And I was like, okay, that's fair enough. But the funny part is, so he was kind of like, you two need to actually make some, you dummies. And I was like, okay, so I made these two. And the thing that's fun is like, it can be like, okay, the MNBA is in playoffs, the WNBA season. Oh my God, you guys, by the time you hear this, it started last night, right? So I'm like in a great time for me. So I was like, oh, it'd be really fun to have like a basketball romance one, right? So they can be topical, whatever. So there's so many really great ones. So Shreya apparently submitted Virgin Heroes, and I like check out the collections page, and I sent Eric this text, and I was like, excuse me, are you literally trolling me right now? Virgin Heroes went up before Hoop, There It Is.
What I love about this though is the Virgin Heroes list. I mean, everybody knows Virgin Heroes are not for Jen. And so it's interesting to me because we may never do a Virgin Hero episode. The closest we'll ever have gotten is when we did an episode related to Fate of Maids Live. No. So, I know. So we did an episode related to Fate of Maids Live, and I talked a little bit about Virgin Heroes. But now there's a list, and a lot of these books I have not read.
See, there you go.
What is the coolest thing about the collections for me is like, I am into a lot of these microtropes, and I think of myself as being somebody who knows the score, but there are so many books in these collections that I've never read. I'm so excited.
I really like about it is, so then Eric does a nice job of being like, you know, we've talked about this book or this author, but yeah, it's like and I think the other thing is, as you all know, just when you're looking for a discoverability buddy, right? If you find a collection that has, okay, 2 books on it you really loved, you can kind of like, hey, I'm probably going to like the rest of these, right? Mm-hmm. Also, it's fun because people come up with their own titles, and the one that I think of as being really funny is by Heather Varlow, who wrote one called Getting Sprung, which is
so clever,
right? About essentially when people get broken out of jail. And I was like,
So clever.
God, why do I love this?
And then Alice Murray did one called First Come, First Curve about plus size heroines and historicals.
Oh, Secret Tattoos from the person
My favorite.
Right, who made the Discoverability Buddy name.
And then Andy has done a couple. Nisha, by the time these are up, Nisha's got a couple in here. So you can go to fatedmates.net/collections or just go to fatedmates.net and it's right there's a link on the main page that's to collections. And so you can head over and take a look and explore. And what we love about this is it's giving an opportunity for people who we love and who we respect and who we think are great, our great discoverability buddies, a chance to have space on the website. And I love this structure too. Like, you could think to yourself, like, I don't know what I want to read. And you don't have to listen to a whole episode, though you should.
Right. And just be like, I wonder what From Starchy to Feral could be about. Well, it's about a starchy hero who comes completely undone. Thanks, Hillary Bowen. That's another great one.
And you can also find a full list of all of the deep dives, like Jen said, and a full list of all of our best lists on here, too. So welcome, everyone, to Fated Mates. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romances and I write them.
And I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor.
And if you are a member of our Patreon, an announcement has been made. So check your email, is what I'll say, just quickly to anybody there. And then everybody else will get that announcement next week, I think. So there's that. That's a little bit of housekeeping that I wanted to do. And then can we talk about Pagebound?
Oh, yeah.
And
so
how
fun.
We have like romance domination.
Give the people what they want, Sarah.
Pagebound, we've talked about it on a couple of podcasts, but it's a ferocious and growing community of book lovers. And you go there and it's basically like a place where you can collect the books that you've read and talk about the books that you're reading and meet other like-minded readers. And so once we partnered with Pagebound and we said, all right, we've got a quest, we're going to be here, we're going to send our listeners to you. This week I went over to Pagebound and it's just romance everywhere as far as the eye can see.
And I think the other part that is really cool is that like very conversation based, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody wrote like there's like a topic that's like IAD for the win. Basically, there's a cheat code for a gold medal, and that's having read all of the IAD books the show covered.
Cheat code.
And I was like, look at this. Here's a fun question. 2 scenarios. What's your take? And so it says, scenario 1, someone who has never read romance before asks you where they should start. You must recommend one book from this quest. Which do you choose? Or scenario 2, an experienced romance reader is in a slump and desperate to find something to get them back in the game. Again, you must pick one book from this quest. What do you recommend?
Being really thoughtful.
Yeah, and then it's like really super fun to read people's answers too.
Yeah.
So
I love, like today, Eric sent me a post that somebody had posted and they were like, what's a book Sarah and Jen have never talked about that you wish they would read? And there were a couple books in the list and I was like, I've never even heard of that book. Like, so you guys, I'm paying attention.
We're listening.
I'm doing the job.
And listen, we all need those fun places to go, especially places where it's just like all books, bookish community. It feels great. So yay. Speaking of fun and bookish community, did you go to any independent bookstores yesterday, Sarah?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yesterday was Independent Bookstore Day. So when you all are listening, last weekend was Independent Bookstore Day. I did this thing originally. I actually was in multiple independent bookstores all week long. And in Brooklyn, there was like a bookstore crawl and you were supposed to like get stamps through like 15 independent bookstores in Brooklyn. And of course, I was in like 6 over the course of the week. And did I have my card for stamping? I did not. So I failed in the like most obvious way. I failed. But what's interesting is it felt squicky this week. There was the Barnes & Noble pre-order sale, which is now, it seems like maybe quarterly, which is, right. Great. Everybody, great. That's 15% off or 25% off your pre-orders if you do it through Barnes & Noble in all formats, which is, a big a big discount. So that happened. And then like suddenly Amazon announced that they were going to do some sort of like Amazon sale yesterday, Saturday. And that felt shitty.
Well, and it was funny because like there was a guy on Blue Sky who was like an author, like a historian. He's like, hey, I just looked and my book is only like $10 on Amazon. I don't know why. And someone was like, it's because Amazon is trying to undercut Independent Bookstore Day. And the guy was horrified because, of course, he was just like, hey, I want people out there buying it. But like, if you were not hooked into that, it's real easy to see how you could not know.
And here's the thing. Independent Bookstore Day is always the last Saturday in April. So it does feel like Barnes & Noble was a little bit eating indies lunches too. I think so. Anyway, so I think, but interestingly, I think the fact that Barnes & Noble and Amazon both were like doing these kind of shenanigan-y things made the elevated indie bookstore day, at least online. Like I saw so many people talking about it. So then I posted, I'm going to post about all the bookstores that I love. And then I got to 20 and I was like, it's too many bookstores. And I don't, and then it's one of those things where it's like you're giving a speech at like the Academy Awards and then you're like, I'm just going to forget. Like, I can't.
Sure. I can't remember everybody.
So then I slowly like deleted all the bookstores that I had been talking about. And I just said like, thank you to every independent bookstore because indies really are like a huge part of how we succeed as people, as writers in the world. And then last night, Eric and I went out for dinner and we went out to a restaurant like a block from the Rip Bodice. So I popped into the Rip Bodice and Catherine from the Rip Bodice was like working and it was packed in there. It was like 7 and there were so many people, which was great. And I was like, it feels like 7 o'clock on a Saturday night for a bookstore does not feel like
you would normally expect it to be.
Yeah. And she was like, oh no. And she's like, it has been like even busier all day. So it sounded like that was. And then I was in my local bookstore too, Bookmarks in Bay Ridge, which is nice.
I only went to 2. There are like kind of 5 independent bookstores like within a mile of me. But I went to, last week I went to a new Black-owned bookstore at like the northern end of Hyde Park called Call and Response Books. And I bought like 5 or 6 books. So I was like, okay. Mm-hmm. And so yesterday I was like, I'm going to drive by and if I can like find an easy parking space, I'll pop in, but I couldn't. So I just kind of kept going. But I went to 57th Street Books. I wasn't able to make it into Seminary Co-op, but they're like essentially the same owner. So I was like, it was just like too busy down by one, but I was able to find parking at another one. And then I went to a really cool new bookstore like in my neighborhood called The Book Joint, which is another Black-owned bookstore. And it is a beautiful space. And it has like a very lovingly curated selection of essentially, like Call and Response does essentially all kinds of people of color. But like this bookstore is really like Black-owned books. But I found a really cool book for my husband. He doesn't listen to the podcast, so I can talk about it, about like Black TV shows. And so like they had really cool books and then just like a really nice like seating area. It was like a really bright, sunny space. So I had a good time there. And then I did not go, there's a Powell's in my neighborhood, but like the Hyde Park Powell's is just like, it's like boring books from the university. No, it's not. I'm just like, nobody wants to read your old textbooks, you weirdos.
Oh,
I'm sure all these books were owned by Nobel Prize winners, but whatever.
Not useful to me unless you put your name in them.
Correct. So it's in great shape and it's like everything's really well organized, but like sometimes I'm just not in the mood. I think a good used bookstore, you have to be in the mood to just discover what comes your way. It's a different vibe.
So my thing is, I think I've talked about this recently because I did this when I went to Montgomery and Taggart too. But I went to, when I go to a romance bookstore now, like I tend not to browse. I tend to just like immediately go to the manager and be like, what should I read?
Yeah.
And then if they recommend me a book that I have never read before, I buy it because like I've read so much that it's hard to find, whatever. So I was at the Rip Bodice yesterday, like I said, and I bought, Catherine recommended Sarah Grunder Ruiz's Luck and Last Resorts, which I feel like I mentioned her second book on I think she has a new book coming out. So I bought that. It's a ship romance, which I'm into.
Sure.
Listen,
I mean, summer is on our way, right?
I like it. And then I bought my daughter. I didn't realize that Ashley Herring Blake had written like middle grade, like lower YA. So I bought my daughter The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James. And then when I was in Bookmarks, I bought my daughter actually reads this like graphic novel series called The Love Report, and there's a brand new one that was out this week, so I got to be a good mom. And I bought a collection of Audre Lorde essays. They just pile up. All my books just pile up.
I'm afraid that is.
And then instead I came home and I read Heated Rivalry. Wait, before we get there though, and Jen, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to turn off your ears because I gotta say this out loud to the crew.
Okay. What are you about to say?
I did take my 11-year-old to see Pride and Prejudice remastered, the re-release on the big screen.
And how was it?
Listen, it was a fucking delight.
I'm so glad.
I had a great time. She had a great time. We ate popcorn and drank Diet Coke and watched Mr. Darcy be Mr. Darcy all over on the big screen.
Is this the one where he clenches his hand?
Yes. That part's nice. That hand.
Did you intuitively understand the power of that moment? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I think I've told this. I know I've told you this story. I'm not sure I've told this story online, but this is the movie that sort of like awakened her to, I think, like romance in general. She was maybe 8 and I was having a day. And so I was watching it and she sort of like toddled into the living room and was like, what is this?
What's this boring thing? And then you're like, oh, and then she was like, no, it's great.
There's a scene and it's raining and they're in a gazebo and he proposes and she turns him down, but then they get like real close. You know, they do one of those like real close, almost kiss things. And she was leaning forward on the couch and she went, kiss, kiss, kiss.
And you were like, look at it worked.
Like, look at this. You've done so well. So anyway, we had a great time. I'm very grateful to, film in general for deciding that we all needed that this week. And I'll be honest, like I saw Sanj went too at some point and she posted on Instagram about it. And she was like, it was so emotional for me. And I was like, it was really emotional for me too, in like a very like cathartic way, like in a sort of, it's such a romantic movie. And so I had a great time and I got all teary at like totally irrelevant, like all teary at moments that I shouldn't have gotten all teary at, but just like felt emotional and nice. So anyway, well done, Keira Knightley. Well done, Matthew McFadden.
Well done, Keira Knightley.
Everything, if you were wondering, everything holds up there.
Well, I mean, it is kind of
I do not believe
a classic story that's held up for a long time.
You know what? I don't believe we need constant remakes of Jane Austen.
And yet,
I think this one is good.
But this one seems okay.
This one is, it's 20, what is it? 25 years old. I
think it was
20 years old.
20? Okay.
2005.
Oh, yeah, then 20. Okay.
Listen, 20 years old, but here's the thing. If it's beautiful, it's set in the Regency, so no one knows
it'll just last
how
forever.
old it is.
Exactly.
The costumes are the same.
And yet somehow they are not.
All right. So that is that. Everybody reporting in. I saw Linda took her statue to the movies. That's some...
Of course she did, Linda.
That's a real vibe, Linda. We love you.
Meanwhile, had I been with Linda, I'd been like, I have to get up and sit in another row now. What is happening? Oh my goodness. It'd be like me going to Mad Max Fury Road and bringing out like a skull. I don't know. What are you guys doing?
Bringing your Tom Hardy poster.
Sure. Furiosa.
That is a movie I would really love to see in the movie theater again. Yeah. Anyway, I'm putting that, so maybe I'm manifesting that for next year.
Maybe we just need to rent one of these movie theaters out.
I did I did some research on this because I thought, it might be fun to rent out a movie theater to like do a screening of of Pride and Prejudice, and I just didn't get around to it. But I did send the email, and I got an email back, and the guy was like, and this is for a movie theater in New York City. So like it was $750. And then, which for like a 40-seat theater. And then plus like the expectation was like people would spend like $15, I think, per person, like for food. And I was like, that's actually not a terrible amount of money for a private screening of something. So I don't know. Maybe we should just do that more.
Yeah, we could just watch whatever we wanted.
My whole theory is you should just like, there should be like a Wednesday afternoon curated Fated Mates movie. If we all lived in the same place, everyone.
Can you imagine? It'd be so fun.
It would be The Saint, Moonstruck. Be a real weird group. Something with Jason Statham in it.
Just a super cut of like explosions on my day.
The first episode of Reacher.
Yes. Oh my God.
That Reacher man sings a lot on the internet, and I find it questionable.
I don't know anything about that.
Really?
No.
Well,
I took all that off my phones.
He's a musician. I think he was originally a musician. I'm talking about this like big giant.
Yeah,
Reacher man.
Sure. Alan Richter.
Like,
or
if you asked AI to build you Jack Reacher, this is the person it would build you. Except AI is not good because it wouldn't build you a person who can carry a tune, probably. And this guy was like a musician at some point, and so now does a lot of like singing to his camera, which, is
I had no idea.
Anyway, so you should go follow him. Alan? Is that his name?
Something. Alan something.
Something. You watch that show, don't you?
I do,
know?
but I apparently don't pay attention to the credits.
Alan something, I think.
Alan Richter. I don't know.
Sure. Oh, yeah. So now let's get to it.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by LaQuette, author of Royal Bride Demand.
Okay, so Raina, our heroine, is just like a normal person vibing in the world.
Sure.
She once had this like great relationship, or, she had a relationship with Jasiri Adebisi, and it fell apart, but she is like over it. Totally over it. And all she really cares about right now is that her childhood home she no longer has access to her childhood home. And she wants that more than anything. Well, lucky for her, Jasiri is back in business, and he needs to get married, and he needs to get married real fast, Jen, because he is a royal prince. Teed up, a secret royal prince.
The best.
He never told Raina about this.
Of course he didn't.
He is teed up to become heir to the island kingdom of Neusi. And in order to take over the throne, he needs to get married fast. So he has come back to claim Raina, the girl who got away, and convince her to marry him and become princess/future queen of this island country. Now, initially, Raina is like, I don't know that I want any part of this, except he's promised that she can have her childhood home back. He'll buy it for her and make sure she has everything she wants in bed, out of bed, forever and ever and ever and ever, if she'll just agree to be a queen.
Raina, I believe in you.
I think she's going to make the right choice.
Okay, so if you would like to read this marriage of convenience, second chance romance that has an enemies to lovers, but they're royals vibe, then you should check out Royal Bride Demand. It is available in print and an ebook. And if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to LaQuette for sponsoring this week's episode. Well, here's what I'm going to say, everybody. We're about to talk about Heated Rivalry by Rachel Reid. And the reason I am nervous about this is because this actually is an interesting question, which is like, what are the books that you think of as being so like beloved by so many people that they become, right? Like there's like, I was trying to think about how to frame this. Like, I don't think of romance as having like a canon. I don't think you have to read anything or not. Like I there's just too much, and I think it's like what you want to read. But I do think that there's a small number of books that have become just like beloved.
I think there are books that are in the zeitgeist, like that, like people, it feels like everybody has read them and everybody
Yes.
who has read them loved them. Yes. And often those books are books that like I have missed. It feels.
One of the things I think is like before Fated Mates a long time ago, when people would ask me like, you know, like, should I read a romance? I would sort of I had like a 2-question, right? And it was kind of like, do you want contemporary or historical? And then I would recommend either Lord of Scoundrels or Bet Me. Because I felt like these were 2 books where I'm like, if you, for like you've never read a book before, you've never read a romance before, right? This is like 10 years ago. I don't know that I'd say these 2 books now. I'd be like,
no, that's interesting. Because I definitely would have said Lord of Scoundrels, but I wouldn't now.
No, right, correct. So this is like, yeah, to be clear, everybody, 10 years ago. And I don't think I'd say Bet Me now. But I would say, like, what I would say to people is, if you don't like these books, then you don't like romance. Like, I think they're very good at doing what romance does, and they are really well liked, and they're great books, and they're really, you know what I mean? They're like the pinnacle of like romance or whatever at that time. And so I think that in some ways, I think this book, I think a lot of people would think of as being like, this is and I think to me that often feels like a way, like this isn't a book that just is insider love of romance.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people would say that this book is a romance they would like recommend to a lot of people, right? Like it's really good at doing what romance does.
Yes.
And I think like when you then come to that book, like the 2 of us have, neither of us had read it before.
Nope.
It's like the pressure. I was like, oh shit, I better fucking love this book, or I don't know.
I mean, it does feel that way often. You're like, oh, what if I don't like it? And here's what I will say. I really did like it. I enjoyed it. I sometimes feel, though, like a book like this, because it's in like, I didn't read it the year it came out. So I think there are a few things at play here. I didn't read it the year it came out, like when it came out. So now it feels like, well, there's lots of queer romance out there, right?
Right.
Like, it doesn't feel as, for me, it didn't have the kind of, it doesn't feel like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like spectacular in that way. Like, oh, I've never read
anything like this.
I've never read anything like it. And also, like, it feels like hockey is everywhere now.
I am also really interested, though, when you do read a book that everyone loves and you're coming to it late, it's really fun to think, well, what is it that people love about this book? Like,
that's
what
the game
is, right?
play,
like, what is what is it about this book that really, like, makes people feel so strongly about it, right? That's kind of a fun thing to sort of like, almost like you're like retconning it in advance, right?
And we'll, I'm sure, get to it, but I think this book really rides an interesting line between what was before and what is now.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. Yeah.
I think it has the sort of tension, and because of like of the way that these 2 characters have to really shield themselves from the world and like protect their identities from the world. So it has this kind of very old school feeling of like, you know, truth and, you know, identity and fear and like threat. But it also is about like, there is something very phone boothy about this book, right? Like it's very, like there are moments of real quiet, like emotional tension that feel very modern.
Yeah.
Like it's 2 generations of romance smashed together.
I experienced several moments of what I will call like cognitive dissonance between the hopefulness of this book for what it would mean about what it would be like to be openly queer in America or Canada or North America or the world, and how it feels reading that now, and like the questions it raised about masculinity. Right?
Yes, because these are so, okay, let's talk about what this book is. Let's give a quick overview. for those of you who haven't read it. So Heated Rivalry 2015 by Reid is the second book in her Game Changers series. This series is entirely about hockey players. They are all queer. The first book in the series is I'm just going to name check because I think it's like we're gonna reference it, I think, or when we talk
about the plot,
when we talk about the plot of this book. The book is called Game Changer. I have not read this, but it is a hockey captain and Scott Hunter. He's important to this book, and a like juice bar barista, like fall for each other. Okay, so Rachel has done this really interesting thing where she's created a world in which queer hockey players exist, but they exist within the confines and the construct of what is existing in like sports masculinity in America, right? So like there is the threat of discovery or there is a constant sort of underlying current of if we are found out to be gay, our careers will suffer because sports and masculinity. So it's this interesting, you said cognitive dissonance, like it's this interesting world that she's built for us, right? Where like all of these characters are hockey players within a real existing sports universe, right? So that's an important thing for you to know. It's not like there are some newer queer sports series where like the whole team is gay and like it's just open and normal. Like that is not what we're dealing with here.
Correct.
So,
this is more like the real world of the NHL and professional sports hockey, where it's kind of where it's forbidden, right?
Exactly. So, and I think that that's part of what's so compelling about this book is like this forbidden. It's a modern day like forbidden romance. So Shane is captain of the Montreal hockey team. And he is, and Illya is a Russian hockey player, and he is captain of the Boston Bears. And and when we meet them at the very beginning of the book, basically like all we know is they've just been on the ice together. They've just had and then there's like, they are rivals. They are presented to us as like straightforward, they fucking hate each other rivals. And then this is a prologue, and in a very interesting twist at the very end of the prologue, it becomes clear that like Shane has gone to this like secret meeting place afterward, and there's a knock at the door, and there's Illya, and then they are gonna fuck.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck, right? And you're like, oh shit, like they're rival captains and rival people. And then it goes back in time to when they were teenagers in hockey camp together. And then the time is really interesting. Like there's a timeline structure here where like she then brings the timeline forward every, sometimes in months, sometimes in years to show us how they have like developed this like simultaneously public rivalry and a private like erotic experience.
The book is organized in 4 parts. Part 1 is like this, like the beginning of their like sort of like really just sexual relationship that they develop. And I mean, I think the thing is it's like, I want to point like, so they are at like the junior world championships for hockey, which is basically like the like, you guys, it always makes you laugh when I read these like college hockey romances, the final Frozen Four. That means they weren't good enough to be where these guys were, right? And then part 2 is like what I thought was like really interesting was kind of a way shorter, just a couple of chapters where there's sort of like an overture that maybe it's more and it kind of gets shut down, right? Like it's like this little window that like maybe there could be more between us, and I thought it like closed because of their own fears or feelings.
Right, because Shane, so sorry, let me just, okay, is it okay if I stop you here, or do you want to finish your thoughts about parts?
Well, I just think like to me, the timeline was less interesting than the parts. That's what I was going to say.
Right.
Like each part, I think, is doing something really distinctly different.
Something very different. Right. I agree. So, but Shane's character is very kind of like, he's like a sweet baby. It has never occurred to Shane to be gay.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like he's sort of written as like, not only has it never occurred to Shane to be gay, it's also never occurred to Shane really to have sexual thoughts.
Right. Yeah. He like,
Right.
because he knows
He's hockey. That's his thing.
Yeah. He's
His job is hockey. And so that's it. Now, Illya is Russian, and you get the vibe very quickly that Ilya's job is fucking people.
correct. Yeah. 100%.
He also is very good at hockey, but this man knows his way around a bedroom. And there's this sort of sense, so there's a really interesting tension between them, like emotionally, because you get this very, and I know you want to talk about masculinity too, but like there is something deeply like Illya feels like he just like oozes testosterone, right?
Well, because Shane describes him that way.
But they're described physically that way too.
But like we're seeing each other like, right, it's through their eyes, right? Like that Shane talks over and over again about how Illya feels like a man. And he does not himself feel like a man.
Facial hair, he has
Correct.
body hair, he's like gruff,
bigger,
and
right? More broader, all those things, right? Yeah, of course.
And then, okay, so then there's this kind of sense of like, okay, Ilya's Russian, Shane is Canadian, and they have for the first 2 parts of this book, you're really reading an erotic romance. Like you're reading them. There's very little that they know about each other than hockey and being hot. Right?
Yeah.
And then as we move into the 3rd and 4th, 4 parts, 5 parts? 4 parts. Then we start to see them like actually become humans to each other, right?
Yes.
Like then we start to see them like grow up, one.
Yes.
Which is important.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the growing up, they start to have to navigate what are essentially feelings, right? They start to feel feelings. And that makes everything more complicated because this is not a conflict that is easily overcome, right? Like you have to overcome society, right? Familial expectation, the masculinity that comes with sports, the expectations of a team, the expectations of, your own expectations for like who you are and the face you present to the world. And then on top of it, Illya is Russian, right? And so we all know that in Russia, there is no way for Illya to be outwardly, openly gay.
Yeah.
I don't think we have to talk too much more about plot, except to say, like, it's basically just like, 10 years or not even. It's like 6 or 7 years of them, like, dancing around each other on the ice. This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Jillian David, author of Paging Dr. Breakup.
So this is the second book in Jillian's Yukon Valley, Alaska Hospital series. And the best way to think about this, everyone, is Grey's Anatomy means Northern Exposure. I don't know. If that doesn't appeal to you, then
I don't know what to say to you because that sounds pretty great to me.
Yeah, The Pit meets Northern Exposure. I will just change it. Okay. So anyway, with no rats, I'm fine. Okay, I'll stop now.
Oh my God.
Anyway. Deirdre Stein is the chief nurse. She's a widow, and she's basically like, I am not going to let my heart ever get broken again. It was too much, right? So she has been fending off the town's matchmakers for as long as she can. She just can't take it anymore. But it really hits a rough spot because her old high school friend, Cal Garrett, is back in town. Calvin is the head of an ER, fast-paced ER in Seattle, but since he's helping his parents, he's also like putting in some shifts at this small Yukon Valley hospital to like sort of pitch in and help out. And the town, of course, is like matchmaking potential, just they can see it. So Cal and Deirdre enter into a fake dating situation just to like kind of shut down the matchmakers. Like eventually Cal will go back to Seattle and they won't have to listen to anybody talking about them. But real feelings start being had when they have these like kind of nice dates and all this time hanging out, right? So the fake dates are turning into real feelings. Everything is going to come to a head at the breakup festival. And this, everyone, is not where Deirdre and Cal are going to break up in front of the whole town, but rather when the ice is going to break on the frozen Yukon River. And so that's when he's slated to go back to Seattle. But this is also like, feels like they don't want to break up. Just because the ice is breaking up doesn't mean they're ready to break up. And so what is going to happen when these two have to figure it out? Like they can't take it anymore.
What is going to happen? Well, you can find out right now in print or ebook. You can get Paging Dr. Breakup today. It was out this week. And if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Jillian and David for sponsoring this week's episode.
One of the things that is worth saying is, right, so we talked about this book was published in 2019. It is now 2025. And as far as I know, there is one professional hockey player named Luke Prokop, ironically, who is not
no
even
relation.
No relation. Who is not in the NHL. He instead he plays for like a, I don't know what it's called in hockey, like one tier down, right? So he's a professional hockey player, but he's not an NHL player. And as far as I know, there are still no openly gay hockey players, right, in the NHL. So the world that they live in, I mean, it's, I think, very, the world of professional hockey, I think that we see the homophobia, their fear of being outed, their idea that like they know gay players must exist. They don't know who they are. They think it would take a lot of bravery. Shane's like, I don't think that's me. Illya, I think it could be, but he fears like if I'm cut, I have to go back to Russia and I can't go back there. Right. So it's like his bravery for him would be an existential, a physical danger as well. The other thing, though, that I thought was really effective about this book was like how young they are. And I think like, you read a lot of romances now when you read about like, they're in college or they're 22 or 23 and they are really not. They're really like, have the abilities and skills and decision making of 36-year-olds, right?
Exactly.
But I mean, these two are kids. And I think one of the things that I found really, truly effective about it is like, so, you're like kind of in their point of view is like these, hookups are happening, basically. They're hookups. And then you would sort of kind of be like, okay, well, why can't these two get it together? And then there'd be this like casual thing where Illya would be like, a brother would call and like demand money. And Ilya's like, I'm 21 years old. And you're like, oh my God, they're so young.
That's why they can't be together.
Right. And so it's like this question of like, what is bravery or like what, you know what I mean? Like I didn't ever find that I was like disappointed or thought that they should have, you know what I mean? Like, but they as people are very aware of like the pressure and the expectations of the league that they are playing in, and for Illya, of his family and his country. And for Shane, who is like, it's, I guess, like a coming out kind of journey for him. The being with women as a professional hockey player is very easy. And he has been with women, but he's never satisfied and he doesn't really like it. And it's clear it takes him a long time to essentially be able to say, like, I think I'm gay, and to say to Illya, but you're really not, right? You're bi. And I think like that is part of the journey of this book for them, is like the hookups evolve in such a way where like Shane in particular is on a journey of figuring out who he is. But Illya is on a journey of figuring out what is possible in terms of his life. Like, and I think they're different. And I think that's another reason it takes them so long to sort of like figure this out. Right.
Well, it's also really interesting because she teased them up in such a way. Yes, they are so young, right? They're, I mean, first of all, a perfect example of a prologue that's doing a lot of cognitive work for the reader, like establishing them as grown-ups before we go back and read them as kids.
I think
right?
that's smart. I would have had a hard time without that prologue.
Smart, right? Yeah. So, one. And then I think there's also this, like, I always joke, like, I say it a million times a day, but, like, heroes should be kings, right? And here are two kings.
Yes, literal
right?
kings,
like,
right?
They are captains of their team at, like, 22 years old. Like, they are brilliant. They are in the Olympics at their age. Like, Illya is the captain of the Russian Olympic team at 22. Like, it's unreal how skilled they are
in that world. Yeah.
And she does, there's this moment, so Illya smokes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I'm always fascinated when a hero smokes in a romance, because there was a time when all the heroes smoked, and now you almost never see it, right? But Illya smokes, at least when he's young, he smokes. He quits ultimately over the course of the book, although, and there's this great moment where they're like being fucking men. They're just being dumb men in a gym, and they're like running on treadmills side by side. And you're in Shane's POV, and he's like, I can beat him. I mean, like, he smokes. Like, I should be able to beat him. And he can't, right? Like, and the joke of the sort of magnificence of this book is they are both kings and they are equal in every way, right? Like, so when Illya wins a game 1 week, Shane wins the next week. Like, there's no, Illya doesn't, the Russians don't make it to the podium at the Olympics, but the Canadians do. So, like, it's an interesting push-pull. And I think what's really fascinating and what elevates this book in a way that, shows Rachel Reid's real skill is that in the hands of a lesser author, this book would have a lack of conflict, right? Because these are just two very skilled people, like, being skilled on the ice. And, like, but because they are both kings, right? What she has established for them is this situation where they cannot rule until they have overcome their own insecurity about
everything. Yeah.
Who they are, who they would be if they were revealed to the world, like what would come next if they were outed, right? Or if they were discovered. And so I think the stress of that is so well articulated and it feels existential for them. And it is existential, right? Like, this is the threat of being outed, right? Is existential. And so I feel really what was magnificent, what I think she does so well is give you these two characters who are so powerful. It seems like they cannot fail, and then deliver you exactly how they might.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she doesn't, for what it's worth, and like, this is spoiling it, they are not outed, right? Like, this is not done.
Right.
She doesn't deliver that threat to them or she doesn't make good on that threat, because the threat itself is so powerful.
Doesn't actually need to happen. They just have to live with it, right?
Exactly.
And now here's where I will admit something. I read this book for the first time all the way through. I'd started this book 4 and DNF'd it. Because I think the beginning of the book, like the part 1 section in particular, is like pure erotica even. Not even really like an erotic romance, right? Like, they have no way of...
Well, the walls are so high.
Right. They have no way of actually getting to each other. And at whatever point in time I tried reading it, I was like, I'm just not into it, right? I was like, I don't really just want to read about these guys fucking all the time. Sorry. And it wasn't and I kind of had forgotten why, I don't think I got that far. I just, whatever. Sure. And then this time around, I was like, oh, I remember now. And I was really fascinated. I was really fascinated by that switched to part 2, because I think I was like, okay, what is going to happen here that's making this part 2? It's not really that time has moved along, right? Like they see each other a couple of times a year. We get like, it was, I think, really smart, like kind of subtle, like at some point much later in the book, Shane sort of says like, after March, like right as it's approaching like the Stanley Cup finals or the playoffs, they, no matter if they saw each other or not, they didn't contact each other. Like hockey became supreme. It just whatever they were to each other was not as important. And so I was really interested in like those sections between like part 1 and part 2. And in part 2 is where we see Shane by the building, which I thought was really smart for showing just how deeply he wanted to be with Illya and how desperately he knew that, like, I mean, the word safe, they had to be safe. They had to be safe, right? That he was like, what is going to make me feel safe to do this? Right. And I was really interested in that. And then, right, like it's sort of like this part where he thinks like realistically about, you know, Russia's laws against homosexuality and like what it would mean for Illya if he was discovered. For Shane, it's more sort of like his emotional vulnerability. But like I was really fascinated. I found myself flagging how many times the word safe is used in that section. Like that's what Shane wants. Like, I want to figure out who I am, but I want to do it in a way that's safe. And because I am one of the biggest hockey stars in the literal world,
right? Where
is that place for us? In Canada. You know, at one point he's like, we couldn't be in the same room in Canada without people knowing who we were. Right. And then in part 3 is the part where it transitions from like that, like erotica. It's like erotica, erotic romance, and then romance, right? Like almost like each part is a different subgenre. And that's when I really found myself thinking like, oh, I'm really enjoying this because now I'm getting the things that I really love out of a romance, right? Which is like all those little moments of like tenderness and connection and, you know, like joy and humor and them like being together and you know what I mean? And so I think it's like a really interesting read in the sense that we talk all the time about in erotic romance, like, right, like sex has to do work. It's showing us the emotional intimacy of the relationship. I think that's incredibly true of this book, but I also think it's telling us something about the emotional journey of the reader. Right? Like it wasn't super emotional at the beginning because it really wasn't for them. They couldn't let it be.
Well, because she's right. It's interesting though, right? Because I feel like she wouldn't have been able to maintain the tension for the whole book if she'd introduced the sort of heightened stakes at the very beginning. Like for the first 2 parts, I mean, part 1 is really the past. Like it's
they're babies.
Part 1 is like how it's basically the rivalry, like how the rivalry came to be, plus how they started to be attracted to each other, right? Like,
yeah, but I also want to point out part 1 was 8 chapters and part 2 was 3. The parts were not equal.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I did find myself thinking, if I can interrupt and not talk about like 2 people I don't think are in love, but like the part that I found really poignant as like a WNBA fan is like I watched in real time last year the WNBA create a rivalry between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Right? Like in every way that is possible to sell the story that these 2 people hate each other. And no matter how many times you get these 2 people saying like, yeah, no, we're fine together. Right? The narrative of the league takes over. And I think that that's the part about part 1 that is so powerful is like, we have no idea how they could have been with each other if it had not been for the fact that they were set up to be rivals by the league. And I do think that's an important part of that first section because they have to undo that too. Right?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting, right? Because I think I agree that that's the structure, but I do think that I think Illya especially likes it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he gets off on the rivalry.
Oh, yeah.
And like, so I don't know that it's like, I think there's something more to the rivalry than like, it's just how they are, it's how they were conditioned to think of each other. Like, I think Illya, and I think this is why, listen, this is really Ilya's story. You know, there's always I feel this way about all romances that like, it's very, very rare that I come across a romance where it's not one character story more than the other.
I would agree. Yeah.
And so I am always sort of predisposed to think about a book as like, well, whose story is this? And I will say, if you're out there writing romance, often you're fucked because it's almost never who you think it's like whose story you think it is. But in this case, right, like Shane is really coming to terms with who he is and he's having to like understand himself and he's going through a real, like for Shane, it, like the first half of this book feels real coming of age in a lot of ways, right? Yeah. But Illya, this is like Ilya's story in that like we get to see him really evolve, which is why in like later in the book when he starts speaking in Russian, and listen, I mean, my favorite, right? My favorite.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, those are great scenes where you're like, I get it now, right?
He gets to Russia, like, Ilya's father, like, is very ill for the first half of the book. We sort of have a sense of what's up. Like, there's a conversation with his dad that doesn't feel quite right. But, like, he certainly isn't interested in revealing himself in any way to Hollander.
Part of the reason that it's fascinating is because Shane is the one who's obsessed with safety, but his position is far more safe than Ilya's is.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, at the end, his parents are like...
He's not going to get deported. He's not going to get deported to a place where he'd be thrown into a prison for being himself. Like, I mean, there are all sorts of things.
He has 2 living parents and they love him and he's pretty sure that they will accept him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's the part that's also really fascinating. And that's why I think it is Ilya's story, because he has...
I mean, he's got more
to lose.
At stake.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so there's this great moment, like late. I mean, it's great. So his father dies, and like it's one of those things. This is not uncommon in a sports romance for like something traumatic to happen at home, and then like just as like listen, Rachel Reid knows the job. Like, you know, we've escalated everything. They've had this like very romantic time together. They're like, you know, moving toward the Stanley Cup. There's like all this kind of happening, but like you're starting to really feel like these two could actually make a go of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then dad dies in Moscow.
Yeah.
And Illya goes home to Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And he's alone there, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a moment there where he is like at sea, like he's without country.
Yes.
Because like back in Canada / Boston, it's all the same. Like he has, you know, this, whatever the community of players looks like for him, right? The team, the purpose, the work, the sport,
his cars,
fans, his cars. And then he has Shane.
Yeah.
But in Moscow, he has nobody. His father is dead. He didn't really like his father very much. He doesn't like his stepmother. He doesn't like his brother, right?
They just want him for his money.
Right. Everybody just wants money from him. And so he makes a phone call. He calls Shane, and there's something very vulnerable. Obviously not just about the moment, but also about the fact that Illya, this like king among kings who like the first half of this book is him just being like fucking like the biggest cock in the league, right? Yeah. And then all of a sudden we see him like in deep romance hero vulnerability.
Yeah.
Calling, and he can't find
the words in English. Yeah.
He can't find the words in English, but he can't find them. Like, yeah. It's all such a like it's just obvious. Like he can't feel the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then Shane says, "Say it to me in Russian."
It's
and I'll just
God tier romance moment.
I won't understand, but I'm gonna listen.
Yeah.
And you're in Shane's POV, which is very smart. And so like immediately, like he starts speaking Russian, and Shane just like is thinking about the sound of his voice, right? And he goes on and on and on, and then he says, "And now I'm done," in English. And then it switches to Illya, and Illya's like, his first thought is he could have recorded the conversation and then put it through a translator. And like, which is a very sort of Russian, like, it's sort of a reminder of like surveillance and threat and all the things that are looming over Illya's head. And what I would say is like Rachel Reid really threads this needle very carefully, because you don't really think about Russia very much for the first two, like 3/4 of this book, 2/3 of this book, right? Like it's sort of mentioned in passing, but like suddenly you see like Illya is worried on a level like far beyond anything Shane could be worried about.
Yeah.
And then Illya, and then he's like, and the worst part was, in the middle of all of it, he'd confessed that he loves him. And of course, I mean, done. I'm like,
no,
this is perfect.
But these were the moments, right?
Perfect.
This is where I was like, oh, now I get why people love this book so much, right? Like, because it's a
great moment.
It is a great moment, and listen, great romances are made out of great moments, right? And I think that's the other part about this. I was taking notes because I was like, what do I want to remember to say about this book? And we say all the time, like heroes have to be kings. These two men are kings, but we are rooting for them like they are underdogs. Right? Because we know that, like, yeah, you can be a king in this world, but how are you going to find your way to each other? How are you going to find your way to this romance, to being in love with each other? Because there's so many things stacked against you, and not just the things like in your own heads, right? And I think the other thing that I think this book does incredibly well, like, again, showing that transition from beginning to end, right, is the beginning, all those scenes it is them in a phone booth, but it's also like the isolation of them being closeted, right? Of how afraid they both are of being discovered, of being found, of being heard. What will happen? And as time goes on, and so like, one of the things and I'm sure you were on watch for this too, is I was like, what are going to be the scene? As soon as I started reading, I was like, okay, so what are going to be the things I'm going to watch for as like showing them like breaking down these walls? And the big one, and I know this is the first time they call each other not by their last name.
Oh, of course. I highlighted it. Shane.
You did. When you said Shane, I was like, that's over.
Listen, this is a god tier microtrope.
Yes. And this book does it so well.
We've all used it. It happens a lot in historicals, right? Where like, instead of referring to the Duke as the Duke, you refer to him by his first name. Or like my favorite, when they're in sex and he's like, call me first name, right? Oh, yeah. I mean, perfect. And Shane clocks it and is like, and it's during sex.
Yep.
And it's interesting because I went back and I reread that sex scene, because I was like, okay, well then if this is the scene where it happens, what happened in this sex scene to make it this, right? And I think, and the structure of the sex scene changes, the pacing of it slows down. She's thinking there are more feelings, like more emotional feelings in that sex scene than there are physical, which is where she is really doing the job here. And what's interesting about this is it happens, and then immediately everything, it sort of goes into chaos. Then he starts to then Shane meets the actress.
Yes. Oh, I want to talk about her. Yeah.
And then this all like sort of predates the way that all of the like barriers start to be like immediately. The first name is terrifying for both of them. As they are elated, and then they are terrified. And then they both go back to building walls. And Shane goes so far as to like fucking date a movie star.
Yes. Right. Well, and I was really fascinated by that because so her name's Rose, right? And that whole part of the book was really interesting to me. I think for what it says about Shane, obviously. I think in a lot of ways, Rose did not feel like a real character to me. She was just like a paper doll of a perfect, beautiful, wonderful woman who like understood him great. But there are two things in particular. Like, I didn't actually really love that part of it, but there are two things in particular that I thought were really great, which is one, when Shane first meets her, he explicitly thinks that she is a movie star in a different, bigger, better way than him. And I think he loves that. I think he loves not being Shane Hollander because he is with Rose, right? So he, I think, finds a kind of like, again, like safety or security or whatever with someone whose stardom is like bigger or more expansive. He's like, yeah, people know hockey, they know me, but everyone knows her. I found that part really interesting. And I think the other part is that he genuinely, at this part, he really did like her as a person. And he'd never allowed himself to feel that way about women before. He'd never had that connection with women before, right? Like, because he was, I think, he was like, do they only like me because I'm Shane Hollander?
Well, and also, I mean, he's very clear, and ultimately at the very end, his parents are pretty clear that, like, he's always been gay.
Right. Like, his parents were like, we kind of maybe thought.
Yeah, like, and then he basically says by the end, he's like, I've had sex with a few women, but, like, it's never been.
Right.
Great.
Yeah, right.
And so I think you're absolutely right. But I think the running to Rose is in direct response to holy shit, like this is becoming very real, because Shane is the one, until Illya speaks Russian, right? Short of, obviously, romance readers know that the moment Illya used the term Shane, he was in.
Yeah, forever. Of course. We all knew.
That's happening. But if you're just like a normal reader,
yeah.
Until Illya speaks Russian, this romance is dominated by Shane's feelings. You know, like at any point, Illya could walk away and we'd be like, well, that guy was an asshole. Like, but Shane, like this is Shane, like reckoning with his fear. For me, this book starts to really sing at that point, like when Illya goes to Russia. This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Measured and Slow Studio.
Everyone, Measured and Slow is a studio that is hosted by one of Romancelandia's good citizens, Alyssa Long. If you are on social media at all, she is just like someone who I have followed for a really long time. And she is a expert craftsman with all kinds of fabric arts, right? Crocheting, quilting, sewing, hand dyeing, spinning, you name it, she knows how to do it. And she has a really cool site, Measured and Slow Studio, where she has all sorts of fun things that you can shop for yourself, for a friend, or maybe upcoming Mother's Day or Father's Day type of presents, right? So there are lots of really cool things, stickers that she designs and 3D printed things, and a lot of really fun bookish items. So in particular, I have my eye on a stack of little book earrings. There are these really adorable little chaises that have a heart at the end. Anything that if you love dragons, there are like really cute like page holders that have a dragon shape, statues, bookmarks, you name it. So if you are just like looking for something really fun and cool that just is like the perfect Romancelandia ethos, then check out Measured and Slow Studio.
So as Jen said, with the holidays coming up and gift giving sort of always being difficult for those older people in our lives, if you know somebody who might be charmed by one of these adorable things, then head to measuredandslow.studio and check things out. Alyssa tells us that anything ordered by May 5th will arrive before Mother's Day in the United States, and that is good news for everyone. Thanks so much to Measured and Slow for sponsoring this week's episode. And again, that's measuredandslow.studio. Listen, it's a fine romance novel that I really enjoyed up until then. But at that moment, when Illya leaves the country, goes to Russia, and has to deal with the Russian of it all, that's when it really starts to like come online for me as like, oh, now I get why people talk about this book like it's,
right.
Canon.
Yeah, right.
I want to talk about the fact that from in that moment, while Illya is in Russia, he says, I don't want to come back here.
I don't want to come back here.
And he's like, I want to be American or Canadian, but I'm in America. So, and then he's like, well, there's this woman, Svetlana, and what if we got married?
Yeah.
And Shane is like, what? And he's like, no, I don't mean you and I get married. I mean, what if I marry Svetlana and you find a nice girl, you want to have kids, like there's another guy on the team who's having children, like, and so he's like, you know, we could have this relationship. Like we could get married. It could be business. He even says like Svetlana's not stupid. Like she knows the score. She knows it would just be business. And suddenly there's this like deep threat of like, what if like, is this the solution? And it starts to really feel like this can't go on this way. Like whatever the game is that they are playing cannot continue. Because there is no logical out.
Right. Well, and I think this is why and when the Scott Hunter of it all happens.
Well, it's right after that, right? Like, it feels, and it almost feels like Rachel Reid was like, oh shit. Like, like she had gotten herself so far along the road that she had like built the wall almost too high. Right? So something massive needs to happen in order to pull back down again.
And before that happens, I will say, it is important to note, and I had a lot of respect for Shane saying, don't marry her. Don't do it. And even though he doesn't have an answer at that moment, he does say, don't do it.
Yeah. He doesn't say don't marry her until after.
Until later. But he does say, like, come to the cottage. And I think what he's saying is, like, and this is, like, the thing about this book that I think it's really perfect in the ways that they say things to each other without saying things to each other. Right? Which is, I think, how so many relationships are. But it's like the weight of all of the ways they had to keep who they were secret means that even when they're talking to each other, it feels secretive. And I think even like their texts, right? Like they don't even have, I was really fascinated how they give each other like names, right? For texts, right? Like, so Illya it's like Jane instead of Shane. And then I can't remember what Ilya's name is. Lily, right? But what the thing that was really interesting is when they're texting to each other, it would say Shane and Lily. And when Ilya's texting, it would say Illya and Jane. So it's like even that part is still like sort of secretive. Like they know who they are, but there's still like this barrier.
There's a wall.
There's a wall, right? They can't.
It's protection. It's not just protection from the outside world. Like who cares about them at this point? Like it's protection from themselves.
Yes.
Like it's like if I bear myself to this person, also don't like the really most interesting thing here. Often in romances in general, someone falls first.
Yes.
Right? And so there is a sort of sense of, you know, she's still nervous, but heroine is still nervous, but the hero is all in. And he's like, whatever comes, I'm going to we'll make it together, or vice versa. Right? Like, or, you know, in queer romance, it looks like that, where one person is just so bedrock certain that like it will be okay. These two don't know. They can't promise that to each other. So Illya says, let's get married. And then after that, it starts to get like, obviously Shane feels panicked. They both sort of feel like that's, they don't even want to look that in the eye. Right. So then they have these like really sexy like that's right after that. They FaceTime. They like have Skype sex for the first time. Like there are these like really lovely. Yeah. The sex starts to get really emotional.
Oh, yeah. Right. Because they do. It's like FaceTime or Skype. I was like, 2019. And at one point he's like, I want to see your face, not your dick. It was great. And then they're just like at one point, I think it's Shane thinks like, this is how it would be if we were like laying on pillows next to each other, right? If we were in the same bed. And like they're longing for this intimacy. I mean, that was and that's
it's really lovely.
It really was.
Lovely.
Like these were beautiful scenes. So then they start like being like kind of texting friends.
And then Shane gets hurt. Which, you know, I'm like,
oh, listen, you love that. Of course, you're such garbage for that.
I'm trash for it. Listen, this is why I don't like a lot of sports romance, because if you don't hurt these fuckers, like, why am I even here?
Right.
Right? If I'm reading hockey romance and nobody's getting a concussion, why? If I'm reading F1 and there's no car crash, what am I even here for?
Yeah, like you have to see. This is like, these are like the best athletes in the world, but that means they also can get really injured. Show me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Shane gets thrown into the boards by Illya's team member. Illya holds it together. Great work, everyone. I was like, what's going to happen now? And interestingly, I will say to everybody that there were a couple of moments where I was like, oh, this is where everybody's going to find out. And then Jen reminded me that was the straight white lady in me who was saying, like, this is how everybody's going to discover that.
Oh, like Illya's going to rush over and be like, that's my boy, that's my man. Goofball.
I know. So, like, the coming out trauma, I appreciate. But anyway, so he gets, like, thrown into the boards. And he gets a concussion, and then he goes to the hospital, and Illya's like trying to figure out like how he can like simultaneously like go check on this man who he loves in Russian and not
he loves in all the languages,
but in Russian especially. and then also like not reveal, because still when they're doing media, they're like, Illya's like, I'm gonna get more goals than this asshole. Like, it's perfect. Listen, I love it.
This is the brilliance of having them both be at the top of their game, because if it was just Illya being like, it is worth it for me to throw my career away to show that I love this man, but he cannot make that decision for Shane.
No,
right?
That's what's so good about it.
It is so good. This is the conflict, right?
So this is, I mean, like, when I say this book really starts to sing in the second half, this is where we are, right? And then they're like, Shane's out of the playoffs because he's got a concussion and broken
collarbones, whatever.
Who even knows? Just, he's been roughed up, which is exactly what I want. And then, but Illya is still in the running for the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Right? So then it turns out, interestingly, Illya, so again, I was like, they're going to, like, how are they going to navigate this? Because you don't want one of them to win the cup without the other, like on the ice, right? And so what she does is she takes them out. She takes them out of the running, right? Like, Boston doesn't get close to the Stanley Cup either. They get into the playoffs, but they don't get to the finals. So they're watching the finals together.
By like texting. They're each watching and like texting. Yeah.
Right. And Scott, you remember I told you about Scott from Game Changer,
Scott
the
fucking
first
Hunter.
book in the series? Scott fucking Hunter. Game Changer, the first book in the series, right? Who, that team, now listen, I haven't read this book, but here's what I'm going to predict. I'm going to tell you what I think is in this book, which is I'm guessing that this book ends with the Stanley Cup finals.
It's got to. Listen.
Right? We've seen this scene before, but from the reverse.
100%.
Right? So they're watching. So Shane and Illya are watching it on TV, texting. And I love this because they never speak by phone.
Yeah.
It's only texting. So they're texting, and Scott wins the Stanley Cup. And then all of a sudden, and they're like, fuck this guy. Why'd this guy win? I can't believe it.
Scott fucking
and
Hunter.
then Scott is making out with a dude on the ice.
And they're like, neither of them can believe what they're seeing, right?
Holy shit.
And I love this, right? Scott fucking Hunter was kissing a man, not like one of his teammates on the cheek in an I love you, bro kind of way. Scott Hunter was kissing a man wearing street clothes, full on the fucking mouth.
Same.
It looked like tongues were involved.
We have the same highlights throughout this book, Jen.
We're the
same person. So, okay. Unreal. Okay. And then it's like they have this moment and they're both experiencing like cognitive, like McCreeve brain, right? Just like full, like static brain. Because here in front of them is proof
that it's possible
that they can have it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a great moment.
The phone rings.
Mm-hmm.
And what's his name?
Illya.
No, Shane.
Oh.
Shane picks up.
Yeah.
And Illya says, I'm coming to the cabin.
Yeah. And then it's part 4. Right? So it's like, and this is what I think, I like talk about structure. I like thinking about structure. I think the structure, like separating the book into parts like this, is really smart, because I do think it is telling the reader something really explicit about And because it's like a timeline, them like looking back, right? Like almost like these are the big moments, like this is when things changed, right? This is when things changed. And the hopefulness that you bring from part 3 to part 4, right? Like, I'm coming. This, all of a sudden, all the things we thought we couldn't have, hey, maybe we can have them. And that both of them thought it at the exact same moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they are literally having the exact same experience at that moment. I thought it was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved
so
it.
Then,
right?
So then they go to the cabin, and it's really like it's fascinating, that cabin thing. It almost feels like that's all just like denouement, right? Like,
yeah.
When Illya says I'm coming, it really is just like, okay, now they're gonna go. They're gonna
figure
be
it
in
out.
like
Yeah.
idle, right? They're gonna be like in love, off season, and like sleep in the same bed, and like eat food, and like swim, and it's gonna be great.
And they do all those things, and it is great.
And it's great. And there's no stress, and there's no tension. It's just like these two men against the world, like in their like beautiful place. And then Shane's dad walks in on them, and it's just this kind of like lovely moment where like the dad is like, ah,
and he like gets in the car, and his parents live like 10 minutes away, and Shane told them, I just need some privacy for a couple of weeks because I'm recovering from my thing, so like leave me alone. So he's pretty sure they'll be alone. But I think the thing about that moment is like he gets in his car and like just like drives away.
Well, I mean, what would you? Of course, that's what you would do too. Like, oh no, I've walked into something that I'm not supposed to see. Like,
yes,
and also like a decent parent thing where like you're not supposed to see it, and like you're like you just want your kid to be happy, and you want your kid to come out to you when your kid's ready to come out to you.
Right, exactly. Not when you stumbled onto them. Now, here's the part that I thought was great. Another really great moment in the book.
About the mom. Was it the mom?
Oh, yeah. But no, wait. But like the conversation about like Shane had been ready to tell his parents anyway. So he's like, I have to go. And Illya's like, do you want me to come with you?
Shane's like, well, it would be weird, but yes, I think I do.
But I loved it because, like, of course, right?
For the record, my husband would never in this case. He'd be like, this is a you thing.
Yeah, listen, your parents walked in on us, forget it.
Good luck to you.
But I thought it was, so anyway, and the thing that's really great is I like really loved his dad for this. His dad has like beaten him home, and mom has no idea what's going on. It's not like dad came in, like, right? Like dad's just like, I'm trying to process. And Shane bursts in with like his heated rival, and his mom's like, what is happening? Why are you here? And then it just all like bursts out, right? And I really, listen, this is the landing I want every person to have with their family. Right?
When they come out with their family, it's perfect. It is truly happily ever after in this moment. You're like, these parents are great. Can I tell you my favorite line though from this whole scene is when the mom, who we've been told like takes hockey very seriously,
right,
was like, Shane, you never let him win, did you? And Illya's response is, I don't need anybody to let me win.
Correct. Right? Well, and then, he says, Mom, do you let Dad win at Yahtzee? And she's like, of course not. And he's like, see, it's so cute. And then the other thing is that his mom, and then it's great because they say, like, right, like we have this idea and we're going to have, like they've come up with a plan. Like part of the time, it's not just like these idyllic, lovely days of being lovers together, right? We have a plan, right? We're going to form a foundation together. It's going to be for suicide prevention after what happened to Illya's mom, which is really sweet, right? And this is what we're going to do. And this is going to be the way that we are going to essentially like overcome the story. And it's going to mean like Illya, who's a free agent, is going to like leave his team and go to Ottawa. They'll only be an hour away, like blah, 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 right? Like they have really thought through like kind of how can we make this work? And so they tell the parents the plan, and the mom is like, you would leave Boston for Shane? And Illya's like, yes. And we had this moment, she frowned as if she couldn't believe anything he was saying was real. And you're like, because this is like really kind of a big deal to leave your one professional sports team for like a worse team, right? Like who would do that? Shane's like, no, my mom actually is upset that you don't have loyalty to your team. And I honestly was like, it's real cute, right?
Perfect.
It's really perfect. And then my favorite part is like right at the end of this scene, it's kind of like, right, like, and they're like, since you're like, how long has this been going on? Of course, is the other conversation. Now,
Yeah, of course.
again, at this point, it's been going on for 6 or 7 years. They are still 26 years old, right?
Wild.
And like, right, since their rookie season, Shane heard his mother say, I can't believe it. And his father's like, looking at them now, I kind of can. Because they're already like doing the thing. Like that thing when we see people who are just so perfect
like
for each
an
other.
old
Like,
married
right?
couple.
Oh, I loved it.
It really, really is great. And then there's this. So 2 things. One, I just want to. There's a throwaway moment where Shane thinks, "Are there Russian vampires?" because Illya bites him, and then he's like, "No, vampires aren't real." And I was like, "Point of order: Cressley Cole's vampires are all Russian." So there is that. So that's canon. And then no, but and then the epilogue is this kind of like moment later where it reveals that that Shane's teammates clocked it.
Yeah, his one best friend, yeah.
And now he is out to the team. And so there is this sort of like community there where they are not like alone on an island. They now have Shane's family and they have Shane's team. And so hopefully that is that. And then
Illya has Shane's family in some kind of way, right? Like that he didn't have a family of his own and that they accept and love him, and how powerful that is for him, I think is really beautiful. Yeah.
And then that is the end of this book. And it sort of has this, and I felt really like rewarded by this. I felt like, okay, this is good. This ended correctly for me. But a lot of people, I think a lot of people felt like they wanted like an assured public happily ever after.
Yeah.
And Rachel Reid delivers that a few years later with The Long Game, which is the sequel to this book, which I have not read, but it's the 2 of them and they're coming
right
to the world.
I haven't read it either. One of the things on our Discord, like this book gets a lot of love, and my friend Laurel talks about like sort of as a person, a queer woman herself, right? One of the things like missing from this book is the sense that like yes, they have each other, but they still are sort of isolated from like having a queer community that they are a part of. And that for any person who is like, we're the only ones, right? That like community is like of being around people like you, that there's a sense of that being, that there's something missing, that it's like better for people to like feel love and acceptance from people like them, right? That we're humans. And that this is like one of the things in particular that happens in The Long Game, that like Shane and Illya can have acceptance from like a larger queer community. I guess there's like a scene where they go out to dinner with other like couples, and that like how powerful it is to sort of say like, one of the reasons that this book for some people might feel like an HFN is like, yes, they have a plan, but they are still having to hide who they really are. And that ultimately like an HEA, right, that whole idea of like the world being righted, yes, they are together and they have acceptance from Shane's family, but there are still, and Shane's friend, but there's still a way in which they aren't like fully realized.
Mm-hmm.
And that book, Long Game, delivers that to them in a way that I think many people then delivers like the full promise of the HEA to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I found, what I think my thing about this book is like, if I were going to reread it, I think I'm really curious about like people who love it and reread it, if they reread the whole thing or if they reread just the second half.
Interesting.
Because I think I know how I am. I love rereading, but I'm like a scene rereader. I don't typically reread whole books. And I think like but like those scenes where like, I don't know, like they're teasing each other, or they're like, I mean, like, listen, the phone call where he's like, I'm just going to speak in Russian, right? Or, right, like the scene where they are at his home and like really feel like free to be each other. They're like playing PlayStation, or they can like sleep in the same bed. Like, I could see myself rereading those scenes because I feel like those are the things I want romance to deliver to me, right? There's a great scene where they are, one of the things that's also really interesting about this book is it is like a real sports book, not just like a...
Yeah, we didn't even talk about this.
Right,
it's so sporty.
Name only. And because...
Well, Rachel Reid is Canadian, so there's that too, right? Like, this is a person who knows how hockey played.
How hockey really works. There's a great scene where, so the only time they could ever play together on the same team would be during like the All-Star games. But like the first year of the All-Star, they do something, they change it up. This is like the league changing it up, right? So it's like North Americans on one side and Europeans on another, even though they would normally be on the same team because it's like, the East versus the West or whatever. And so there's this great scene, a scene I really loved, where the first time they play on the same All-Star team, how much they love playing together. That they like can like just feel like they can just read each other's minds and their signals, because they both like have been studying each other as athletes, but also know each other so well as lovers. And so it's like this great moment where Illya's like, I could just like pass it to him and he will be there in the right place at the right time. And I loved that. Like, I love the sense that like, or like when they're at Shane's cottage, like Shane has his own like gym and his own like little hockey rink or whatever. And that they have that in common in a way that the league made them feel instead was not in common, right?
Yeah.
You're rivals. You don't have this in common. You're two different. You're opposite sides. And they're like, no, we have this shared love of this thing together. It was great. Yeah. Lots of hockey.
Lots of hockey. If you grew up a hockey fan, in say New England, this is the hockey sport for you, the hockey book for you. I all in all had a great time.
Me too.
So, thanks to everybody for telling us that we had to read it for a million years. Thanks to Adriana Herrera for saying, I've read it a million trillion times.
Yeah, I think people have. I think there's a real comfort, I think, to people who figure it out despite all odds, right?
Agreed. Let us know what you think about this book and this series. Let us know if we're right about the content of the first book and the last book in this series.
Yeah, we make wild predictions.
It's like a new episode where we should just make predict what happens in the book.
I'm writing that down. That's a great idea.
Anyway, let us know, and let us know if you have other favorite Rachel Reid books that we can recommend to people, or we can pop into maybe a collection.
Oh, there you go.
Hockey books to read if you loved Heated Rivalry, everyone. Okay, I'm Sarah McLean. I'm here with my friend Jen Prokop. We are Fated Mates. You can find us every Wednesday at fatedmates.net or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you want to learn more about collections from other listeners and authors and other people who we love, head over to fatedmates.net and click on collections. While you're over there, click on show notes and you'll see everything that we referenced today on the podcast. And on normal weeks, you'll also see all the books that we reference when we make recommendations. You can also find us online. We're on Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram. And if you are just looking for a place to talk more about romance novels, head over to the Patreon and join us. That's at patreon.com/fatedmates. When you are a member of the Patreon, you also get access to our Discord, which is full of brilliant people saying brilliant things about romance. And you get an extra episode of the podcast every month where we sometimes say things that we would never, ever say on main. So that's your little...
Giving away our secrets.
I know. That's the temptation to join the Discord, I guess. Or the Patreon, I guess. Other than that, it's gonna be May.
Now Sarah's singing. All right, Alan Rickson. Have a great week, everybody.
Alan Rickson. Bye, everyone.